I'm generally not a conspiracy theorist. There are, I think, there's two conspiracies that I firmly believe, and one that I could go either way on. And the one that I firmly believe got actually questioned this weekend. I believe three conspiracy theories. One, I don't believe there's any gold in the vaults at Fort Knox. The people who work there don't believe the gold is there, and if why would the government want you to know where the gold was? They want you to think where it is, but they don't want you to know where it is. I realize that's a pretty conspiratorial sentence for somebody who doesn't believe conspiracy theories. The second conspiracy theory I believe is that Stevie Wonder ain't blind. And then this past weekend, when he held a microphone to Mariah Carey, who had since left, standing right next to him, and he looked foolish or like a blind dude, that made me question it. And then the third one, I find it really difficult to believe that Kurt Cobain shot himself, but I understand the argument that's made in the official documents and all that stuff. But that's it. Those are the three that I believe. I believe that we landed on the moon, that the Titanic actually hit an iceberg and crashed. Whatever. I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. There are a lot of conspiracies that I just don't buy. So I don't know what to make of the SEC Big Ten partnership. Generally, I get a pretty good feel for these things. I have an idea of like, oh, okay, that's what they're really trying to do. And again, I realize that the statement "that's what they're really trying to do" is a pretty conspiratorial statement. But I generally have a pretty good feel about like this is what we're telling you we're doing, and then this is what this is what the intention is, and you can kind of read between the lines. And I think what you can read between the lines of the SEC Big Ten, I don't even know, coalition. Coalition seems very like professional wrestling terminology to me. Like, oh, the coalition of the Big Ten and SEC is here to run train against Alpha Academy. But the coalition, I think that's the right word to use. And if I think of a better one throughout the podcast, we'll go ahead and use that. But I think it's there's some conspiracy theory in there, right, of what the coalition between the Big Ten and SEC is really about. I think that the coalition between the Big Ten and the SEC is not even a thinly veiled threat to the NCAA of you're going to do our bidding now, or we're gone. And when you get those now, what is it, 34 teams that make up, for the most part, the biggest brands, biggest names, biggest schools, biggest universities in college football, and not just college football, but college basketball outside of Duke and North Carolina. Um, there's a lot of power behind those two outlets, organizations, groups coming together. I don't know that I want to go as far as to say that the Big Ten and SEC now have the ability to hold the NCAA hostage. But I think the SEC and the Big Ten have the now ability to hold the NCAA hostage. And they might be interested in participating in a scenario where, like, okay, we'll still be under the NCAA umbrella under swimming, track and field, lacrosse, baseball, softball, wrestling. When it comes to football, basketball, men's and women's basketball, we're gonna go ahead and do our own thing. And I don't know that the Big Ten and SEC have the cojones to go out and do their own thing in basketball, but I know for a fact they have the berries to do it in football because those two entities alone, the Big Ten and SEC, make as much money as like NASCAR and the PGA Tour and the NHL in their TV deals for college football. That's a lot of money for 20 universities in the Big Ten, or 18 universities in the Big Ten, and 16 universities in the SEC to take home every year. To have that amount of power, that TV executives view you as bigger than the NHL, bigger than the PGA Tour and NASCAR. It's a pretty powerful spot to be in. And when you have that power, and it's not newfound power. They've had it the entire time. It's just the apprehension of actually sitting down and using it. I've often said, like, sometimes you got to put it on the table, let people see it, and then you can start throwing your weight around a little bit. The SEC and Big Ten have had that power for a very long time. They've just played nice for a very long time in the quasi-spirit of amateur athletics and student athletes, and this is all about the spirit of competition, when it's been obvious, painstakingly obvious, for a long time that it's been more than the spirit of the game. It's been about fat stacks of cash and bottom lines and having black numbers instead of red numbers. And that's what it's been about for a very long time, and just now finally coming to the realization that, like, oh, wait, yeah, this is a business. And people have pretended like it's not a business for a very long time. And part of that goes hand in hand with players, right? Players started treating it like a business. When Christian McCaffrey says, there's no way in hell I'm playing in the Sun Bowl because that's going to wreck me if I get hurt. It's going to cost me millions of dollars. Not doing it. And then everybody else started to open their eyes to the fact that, like, oh, wait, yeah, no, he's kind of right. Why would I risk getting hurt in a meaningless bowl game? And now the term meaningless bowl games has become just this hot button topic in college football circles that, no, they're not meaningless. They're meaningless if the players don't find any meaning in them. Like the old rich white dudes who run the bowl committees can find all of the meaning in the world for them. But if the dudes who play don't find meaning in them, they're meaningless. And so when players started treating it as a business, I think almost like retroactively or subsequently, maybe, the adults in the room who felt that they had been shafted by players treating it like a business then said, okay, well, if you want to see us treat this like a business, sit back and watch this. And so that's what happened, is we now are full on into the business side of college football. It's always been a business. It's just always been a one-sided business. And the powers that be, and this isn't a problem exclusive to college football. This is a problem exclusive to society and to the economy. The dudes who have the power and the money want to keep the power and the money. It's that simple. And other people want part of the money. That's all there is to it. It's just everybody is no longer playing nice and no longer pretending as if we're operating under the guise of amateur athletics or whatever the case may be. In the Big Ten and SEC, especially when it comes to football, there is no such thing as student athlete, scholar athlete, etc. There might be some dudes who are very good football players who also play school good too, but make no mistake about it, their primary focus is playing football at the highest level with the hopes and dreams of someday playing in the NFL. Now, for the overwhelming majority of those players, that's a misplaced priority. It's the reality of the situation. They're not going to play in the NFL, or if they do, they're not going to have a long enough career that they can bank on that for retirement benefits, money that's going to set them up for life, etc. They're going to need to fall back on the free college education that they got, which is a hell of a payment plan. But also, they're generating billions of dollars. So, I don't think the trade-off is all that bad. But I think a coalition between the SEC and the Big Ten is to basically say, and I don't want to get too historical reference here. Basically, back in the day, the United States stole the state of Hawaii from the Hawaiians, and there was a new constitution put together that they called the Bayonet Constitution, which really sounds like something that you want to put together if you're a Hawaiian. And it's sort of similar to what the NCAA is about to start doing, is there's going to be like a bayonet constitution for the NCAA that has been put together by the SEC and Big Ten that's basically saying you're going to do what we want you to do. You're going to do what we tell you to do. You're going to set up the rules the way we want them. You're going to operate and manage and govern the sport of college football the way we want it, or we're taking our ball, going home, and you're going to be looked at as a bigger sham, fraud, toothless organization than you already are. So it's a hell of a spot to put the NCAA in. But when you have that power, and really you can only play this card, I think, once. It's sort of the same thing. I think most people have probably been in a situation with like a coworker or something where like, God, I hate this guy. I hate him. And you eventually think like, okay, I'm going to tell the boss, like it's either him or me. One of us has to go. And you can play that card. You can only play it once. You can only lay that thing down on the table one time. Like the second time that you're trying to say either it's him or me, well, it feels like this time it's you. So I feel like you've got to delicately play your cards. And I don't know that the SEC or Big Ten has played their cards. They've just shown them to the NCAA. They've basically said, this is what we are capable of. And if these two organizations, you could borderline call them companies, these two companies coming together that you would think maybe almost assume are diametrically opposed to one another, are coming together with the common goal of like, hey, we might not agree on a lot, but we agree that you suck at this. And so we're gonna overthrow this thing if you don't get your bleep together, is a hell of a spot for the NCAA to be in, because they've been kind of governed that way for the last decade or so anyway, where the Power Five is governed by proxy through the NCAA, where, they got to introduce their own legislation. They got to, and what other choice did the NCAA have? NCAA is not dumb. They know who their cash cows are. They know who the biggest deals are, or who draws the biggest eyeballs, who brings in the most money, the most fans, etc. And when that's all you care about, and make no mistake about it, that's all the SEC and the Big Ten care about too. They can argue all they want about how they care about the student-athlete experience and the fans and blah. They don't. They care about how they can get the most money out of you. How they can separate you from another dollar is all they care about. And that's not exclusive to college. It's the same thing for the NBA, NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, PGA Tour, tennis, whatever the case may be. That's all everybody's trying to do, is separate the dollar in your pocket from your pocket into their pocket. So the SEC and Big Ten can give you all the poppycock, malarkey, balderdash, other words that mean bullshit that they'd like. But really what they want to do at the end of the day is make as much money as possible. And when the NCAA is standing in their way of doing that, and I think there's probably, and I think this doesn't get accelerated until, like, the SEC only gets 2 or 3 teams into the 12-team playoff. Because right now, that's the cash cow, is getting teams a pathway to winning a title. Getting teams a pathway to winning a title while also subsidizing the teams in your conference that don't really have a path to the title. But, hey, like, we appreciate you, Purdue and Mississippi State. You're going to get a nice check at the end of the year, and we appreciate you letting us kick your ass. It's a fair trade-off to be associated with one of the 2 biggest brands in college sports, and what is increasingly feels like it's going to become an AFC, NFC of a college football system that the players aren't necessarily going to college as much as they're just young guys that are college age that are playing for a team that has licensed the terms Ohio State Buckeyes, Michigan Wolverines, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Alabama Crimson Tide, Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators from those schools, and operate their own little football businesses. Now, I don't think that's like super close on the horizon, but I think that's where you get to eventually. Because eventually somebody's going to be like, well, wait a second. Why are these like institutions of higher learning spending hundreds of millions of dollars on sports every year? And our like chemistry lab was built 95 years ago. It's just going to happen eventually. At some point, there's going to be some renaissance that somebody's going to look at that map that's published in USA Today every year that shows who the highest paid public employee is in every state, and like 42 of them are football coaches, while the others are basketball coaches, or then like the medical school dean that's been around for 40 years. Somebody's eventually going to be like, well, hold on, we can't really be the party of fiscal responsibility and then also be like the highest paid employee of our state, makes $9 million to tell 18-year-olds to run a post route. So eventually, all that's going to change. I don't think it's on the horizon. Like I think in the last 5 years, I've said, in the next 5 years, the NCAA is not going to exist, at least in college football. And I think that's what this ultimately, the coalition between the Big Ten and SEC, is going to be about. And it's crazy how, in such a short little time, back in a couple of years ago, it was the historic alliance between the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 to basically combat the SEC. And now the Big Ten's like, hey, there's only so many life rafts, and you know what? We better be on one of them. So, hey, SEC, would you like to make boatloads of cash with us? And they're not going to say no to that. So I don't know if that's conspiratorial or not. I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory to believe that that's the ultimate goal, but I think that's the ultimate goal, is to just flat out say, like, hey, you're going to do our bidding for us or we're out of here. And what's the NCAA supposed to say in that situation? What's the NCAA supposed to do in that situation? Other than what the biggest names, biggest brands, biggest universities, biggest eyeball drivers, biggest money makers want them to do. The Big Ten and SEC have all, make no mistake about it, all of the leverage in the situation. And that's a hell of a spot to be negotiating from. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all that great college football content we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. Be back at it tomorrow right here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.